You're listening to Hockey Talk on the Rock
All right, stop.
with Laura and Keith.
It's interesting.
So let's back up a second.
He played absolutely out of his mind.
It made no sense to me.
And now, here are your hosts.
Welcome back, everyone. Hockey Talk on the Rock.
Episode 14.
I think so. I was just going to say I forget the number we're at now.
Slowly climbing up, and last one before the start of the regular season here. So
Woohoo!
looking forward to watch some hockey, even though there's been a couple postponements already.
Yes. Yeah, so I guess starting off there, we know for sure that the Dallas Stars season won't start for another week. And then Columbus had a scare, but it looks like they're back to normal now. And then the Canucks canceled their practice today because of a potential exposure. So just hoping that it's nothing, that there's no actual positive test within the organization. But we don't know yet at this point. So anyway, it's going to be an interesting year in general with the compressed schedule. And then if anything does happen with a team, like Dallas, I think they're going to have to make up its 3 games or something at some point here. But then obviously the teams they're playing will also have to make up those games. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it goes. But baseball seemed to figure it out at a point. I know at the beginning of their season, they were having tons of players test positive and postponements. But then as the season kind of got more important, it seemed like the players buckled down a bit and,
It was looking really bad for baseball at the very beginning. I almost thought it was just going to totally collapse, but if you figure if they can get it figured out, that there was expected to be a few bumps in the road at the beginning, I think, especially in the States, but kind of surprising with Vancouver.
Yes, me too. I was very hopeful that with the Canadian division, it would kind of be a bubble in the sense that, they wouldn't have the same issues that they're having in the States, but not off to a great start, but at the same time, don't want to overreact because it could be totally fine. So this stage, I'll remain hopeful that the Canucks season starts on Wednesday, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I mean, so far, some of the highlights and everything going on at their camp has been looking pretty promising.
Yeah, so there's 2 kind of storylines, I guess, that we didn't talk about because they didn't happen the last time we talked. So the first is that the Canucks signed Travis Hamonic to a PTO, which made me very happy as a Canucks fan because to me that really shores up the defense, which I think was their major issue moving into this year at that point. But now it looks like they're going to start off, assuming they sign Hamonic, which I'm assuming is very likely, otherwise he wouldn't have come in on the PTO. But it looks like he's going to play, he's going to play for the Canucks, and then they're going to give Levy a shot on that third pairing, which I think is really smart, but also it doesn't override or, put too much pressure on the young kids like a Rathbone or a Rafferty having to come in and play as, regular in the NHL, provided there's no injuries, which we know there will be. But just to start, I think that defense now looks very good. And, outside of Montreal, I'm going to try and think if there's anyone else in the Canadian division whose defense I actually like as much as the Canucks right now.
Top to bottom, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good. I mean, we had been talking about how they, wanted something extra, needed something extra, hopefully. And from what I heard, it was going to be like a $1 million deal, which, if that's the case, is pretty lucky for them.
Yes, the COVID kind of silver lining at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Hamonic's a guy, he's wanted to play in Western Canada basically since he was on Long Island. So I assume he was pretty picky about where he wanted to play. And if, Calgary wasn't going to offer him a deal, it's, Edmonton, Vancouver, Winnipeg. And I'm kind of surprised Winnipeg didn't go after him, to be honest. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I thought Winnipeg as well when we were doing our off-season talks earlier. But it works out for Vancouver. And then hopefully they're the 2 things they talk about most with Vancouver going into the season were their depth on defense and their who's going to play on Bo's wing is always
Yeah, and that's the other.
So it sounds like we might have an early winner for that spot, or like a favorite for the candidacy, I guess.
Yeah, it looks like Hoglander's come into camp and he's gonna be given a shot, which is really exciting, obviously, for a number of reasons, but also interesting because we know kind of with Travis Green, the reason why he's hesitant about playing Virtanen on that line is because of his defensive liabilities in his game, which is why you'll either really see Virtanen on the first line or on the third line, right? But you never really see him with Bo. But if Hoglander's been given that chance at playing on the second line with Bo, it must mean, to me at least, that Green is somewhat comfortable with him playing those defensive responsibility kind of or matchup games, if you think about it.
Right.
On top of his obvious talent for scoring, which has in camp it's looked pretty good, but you can't say yet. Like you can't get too excited yet.
No, preseason is always such a big throw off.
Yeah, but that is for me now. Now that Hamonic signed, that's definitely the one concern or point that's going to be very interesting to watch with the Canucks. But if he is on the second line with Bo, then they can roll out a third line of Gaudette, Virtanen, and Roussel, which not only I would think would have better offensive kind of chances than the third lines that they've rolled out in past for the Canucks, like in the last 2 years, let's say here, 4 years maybe. But it's also a line that I could see being very annoying to play against over and over again, which in this divisional play is pretty kind of, you want to have a line like that. I know that Gaudette said he was having some sort of stomach issue that he's now resolved that he'd had for the last few years. So I'm wondering if he's going to have kind of a breakout year to some level or maybe solidify what he is. I know we talked about Gaudette a lot. And Roussel, he's one of those guys that I think he can give more than what he did last year for sure. But again, people are going to hate him in the Canadian division here, so that'll be fun.
Yeah, I mean, Roussel's so streaky as a player that it's like, for me, I almost want that fourth line to look something like, and it won't be, but like center in the middle of, McEwen and Mott.
Yeah.
And depending on how Roussel's playing, you can try to rotate either Mott or McEwen up into that spot on the third line and give them some looks, at least a little higher up. But they're probably going to likely have Sutter and Beagle out there because they value the penalty killing.
Yeah, and that's what it sounds like to me. Kind of the biggest loser of the training camp so far is McEwen, because I agree with you. I'd like him to be in the lineup, and I mean, again, there's gonna definitely be injuries this season. There's gonna definitely be chances for him to be in the lineup, but he's someone that the Canucks haven't done a great job at developing players through Utica specifically. And McEwen is one of those guys that has a chance. They have a chance to have completely developed this player. And he's someone that I hope can make his way as a permanent NHL player. But we'll see.
We will see. And we will see very soon. Like 2 days, 3 days.
Yeah. This is my last bit of Canucks talk for this episode, I promise. But the other thing that we haven't brought up yet was the fact that Travis Green doesn't have a contract beyond this season. And It sounds like from all reports they're going to try and sign him, and it sounds like he wants to stay.
Yeah.
The longer it goes on for the question's going to be, why isn't there a contract then? But it's just something to keep an eye on because
my personal theory is that it's just like it was such a financially devastating year for so many people, especially with people with a bunch of money like the Aquilides.
Yeah.
So my theory is they were kind of waiting till the end of the fiscal year to kind of assess everything moving forward. And now that we've rolled into the 2021, they're going to probably, come into tax time and start looking at their money. And I bet you probably, March, April, around mid-season, they'll probably get something done. The way it is with COVID, I guarantee it's more likely than ever to be something that legitimately is like looking at things very closely on the financial side.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, if he was to walk away too at this point, you know, he was the coach the Canucks had hyped up for so long being in their system. And it would obviously be disappointing because I think he's done a good job with this team. But, you know, I agree with you. I think that they're going to get something done. I'd be shocked if they
Oh yeah, I think so. And if they like on the odd small chance they don't, and he walks to a free agency coaching thing, I would say my money would be on a quick drive down the I-5 to be the coach of the Seattle Kraken. I bet you that would work out.
Yeah, I could see that too. He'd be a great expansion team coach. So moving away from the Canucks, our other big hockey news in the past week, which is depressing if you're from Canada, is that the US won the World Juniors. They won that gold medal game. Trevor Zegras was the MVP, and he had a great tournament. Just a couple kind of thoughts on the tournament in general for Canada, because I know it's been talked about a lot, but it really seems to me like they were basically a victim of their own success. They played so well until that game against the US that they hadn't had any adversity, but it wasn't even really like their fault they hadn't had it, because if you think about it, they played Finland, they played Russia, and they stomped them both games. It was not a problem for them, right? But as soon as they fell behind against the US, I just had this feeling they were going to lose.
I agree, and I mean, it's like you say, the adversity thing was obviously the issue, right? Because what was it? They never even were tied, other than 0-0 in the tournament, and they never trailed and anything like that. So the first time they were behind the whole tournament was in the gold medal game. You have to imagine that it was just a matter of the pressure going so up so quick on these kids. And I had a thought on. I'll throw a thought out there I had with the World Juniors and watching all of Team Canada's games. I think maybe I might have missed one. I thought Quinton Byfield was pretty unspectacular. Like,
Yeah,
one really good game, but every other game he didn't look that good to me for someone who went second overall and higher than Stützle in the draft, who looked fantastic throughout the tournament.
yes,
And
I agree with that.
there was a couple other like noticeable guys, like the big guy in Sweden, Elmer. What was his name? The
The 6'5" guy.
Yeah. He's a fifth rounder for Detroit.
Yeah, I can't think of his name. Soderstrom, maybe.
Something like that, or Soderblom or something.
Yeah.
He looked good, and there was that Winnipeg Jets defense there, Hanola. He got best defense of the World Juniors award, I think. He looked fantastic.
Yeah, there was a few guys that had really good tournaments. The other player that I'm gonna throw out there that I thought was unspectacular for a second World Juniors was Askarov.
Oh yeah, I would agree with that too.
And it's very interesting because, like, especially when you watch Spencer Knight in that gold medal game, and like the US played a very good defensive game that game. So it wasn't like he was getting a ton of point blank chances, but he looked great. And then in the game immediately before that against Russia, Askarov just looked terrible. And again, I'm always like, you don't want to put too much pressure on it. It's 2 weeks of hockey and they could be fine. But that was just, kind of disappointing.
Staying with that, I've got two quick tell me I'm wrongs for you.
Okay.
Tell me I'm wrong. Because Canada got silver, they're going to be in a harder group next year. In Group B, it's going to be tougher competition throughout the round robin. So tell me I'm wrong. They bounce back with the early tough games and win the gold medal next year.
Oh God, that's hard because I'm trying to think about what their team's going to look like next year. But you know what? I'll say they do. I'll say they win gold next year.
And then my other tell me I'm wrong that the LA Kings will eventually regret taking Byfield over Drysdale, as I had predicted.
Yeah.
How good Drysdale looked in.
Okay, I'm gonna say you're wrong on that one, and I'm only gonna say it for one reason, and it's pretty stupid. But back in like 2012, when Nathan MacKinnon played for Team Canada, and so did Jonathan Drouin, I remember having this whole debate with my friend who was in a kines class with me, and MacKinnon was terrible. He hardly put any like points up in that tournament, and Drouin looked like spectacular. And he was like, "Oh, it's so stupid if they take MacKinnon over Drouin." And I was like, no, they played completely different roles on the team, and it's completely like, it's going to be fine. I still think that Byfield will develop, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I think that he's just got too much of the right tools, but what I would be concerned about him is he doesn't really seem to be a big game player.
No, and he doesn't seem like there's a couple plays in close that his hands don't seem like he has amazing hands,
Yeah, but again, that can change. I don't know. I'll say that I think Byfield is gonna be. I don't know if he'll be better than Stützle. That would be one.
Right.
I'm not sure about, but I think they'll be okay with him over Drysdale. Although I thought Drysdale had a good tournament.
Mm-hmm. I got no other World Junior news. Well, I mean, I guess Podkolzin
Podkolzin
looked good. The reviews were good.
He was, I think, Russia's best player.
They said that it was more about the fact that he is more of a playmaking player, two-way player, and no one was finishing. So his points didn't reflect how well he played, from what I understand.
That's kind of what I heard as well, and it sounds like the Canucks are going to try and bring him over, once his season is finished in March or whatever in the KHL. And that's obviously going to add another kind of level of intrigue to the Canucks season, depending on how things are going. But, it would be really nice if they could add scoring to their bottom six, which is, a problem the Canucks have had for a long time, despite the money that they play. So if Podkolzin could be a solid two-way player for them and maybe like a power play specialist kind of guy, it would be really nice for the Canucks. But yeah, that's basically all I have. I'm really interested to see how really kind of the top three players in that tournament, in my eyes, play in the NHL this year. Like how Zegras is going to play for Anaheim, Stützle in Ottawa, and then I'll throw Dylan Cousins in there too for Canada because I've watched Cousins a lot in Lethbridge. And he's one of those guys that I always just had a feeling he was going to be a star in junior and then not be able to put it together for the NHL. But he looks pretty good now.
I threw Bowen Byram out there too. I think he's pretty much a lock to play in Colorado. If Heinola didn't get the best defense of the tournament, I think Byram's probably the runner-up.
Byram was good. He was solid. And that will kind of lead me into my next question. So, season starting Wednesday. If you had to pick right now who your Stanley Cup champion for 2021 is going to be, who would you pick?
Well, I'll pick a Eastern and Western champion, and then I'll pick a Stanley Cup champion. I think I would, for the Eastern Conference champions, I would give it to Tampa Bay. I think there's still enough parts of their championship team from last year, and supposedly Kucherov will be coming back at that point as well, and the cap won't matter. So I feel like, there's no reason to bet against them in the East to take that one. And then in the West, I think the easy and obvious choice is Colorado, because they were really good last year. And if there wasn't injuries to their goalies in the playoffs, I feel like they would have went further, maybe even given Tampa a good run for the Cup. So they made good depth additions too. So yeah, I think it would be a Tampa Colorado final, and I could see myself giving it to Colorado, depending the goaltending would be the factor, I think.
Yeah, so I don't know, I tried to kind of go through all the teams that I would consider as favorites. And right now in the NHL, it's quite interesting because I think a lot of teams have very obvious flaws. And so, everyone's picking Colorado to win the Stanley Cup. And I like Colorado as a team, and they have improved, I think, getting Saad and adding Byram to that defensive core and Taves is going to be really big for that team. But I do not like their goaltending one bit. But what I will say is I think they're a team that could, it might not even matter who they have in net, because I think they can outscore their problems, and their defense now is so good that I don't know if it necessarily matters, but I do have doubts. Anyway, the only other two teams that I would honestly consider as being contenders right now are Tampa Bay. I think they're basically the same as last year, and I don't see a reason why they'd take a huge step back. And then I also think your boys, I think Philadelphia. I like their team. I don't know if it's this year, but they're getting to a point where I think they're above the rest of the teams in the East outside of Tampa. But
I think they got to do it this year or next year because they're still in the upper downhill years of the prime of Claude Giroux and Jakub Voracek, and they've still got Couturier in his prime, but like they need to have it work while the old core and the new core
are together,
are still working well enough, and still effective enough. I want to bounce back quickly, and since we're on Philly, like they got two pretty high prospects on USA, Bobby Brink and Cam York, and I thought Brink looked noticeable sometimes and okay, and I thought York looked really good, especially quarterback in the power play. Yeah. Do you know the story of Bobby Brink?
Isn't it Bobby or Brink?
It is Bobby or Brink. I love that.
Amazing. That's an amazing name.
Yeah, with the Flyers, everyone hated what Hextall did by the time he was gone, but what he did best for better than anyone probably in the past for Philly is restock the cupboards properly in terms of building out the defense as well. So I think the hockey world now knows Carter Hart is the real deal. Yeah. It'd be surprising if he took a step back. I think he's going to carry them. That's going to be key. I mean, with the back-to-backs and the condensed schedule, I mean, Brian Elliott always worries me. He can be really good sometimes, but for the most part, he's not. And their defense is good. I think they're at the point where you were telling me that Samuel Moran's moving up to forward. I think he's a former first-round pick, and if he's not, he's a second-rounder.
I think he's first.
Yeah, and so that's cool that they're transitioning him in a Brent Burns type move. And I think they're probably going to try and address some scoring on the wing this year. And they'll try. I know they're trying to trade Gostisbehere, and other teams don't want him right now.
Yeah.
But I think they'll consider moving somebody off the defense to bring in a winger. And their center depth is good, so good. Couturier and Hayes are the 1-2, and they have that luxury of moving Giroux over to the wing because of that.
Yeah.
So I think
they were a team that I think probably got hurt the most by having the stop last year. I don't think they really ever played that great in the summer. They won a couple rounds, or one round, and then they made it to the second round. But they were never themselves from before the break. And I just think that teams are going to be kind of, I don't know, maybe angry, but maybe just wanting to prove something in that situation. I think Philadelphia has the best chance of doing that. But yeah, I don't know. I think I'm going to go out and I'm going to say that the Lightning are good. I don't know. I could see any three of those teams doing it, but I just don't want to pick Colorado because everyone's picking them. And I don't know, the NHL doesn't really seem to always work like that, but I'm going to say that the Lightning repeat, but I don't know.
It's possible. It's possible.
Yeah. Anyway, there's a couple other little tiny NHL news. So
yeah, the Barzal re-signing.
Yeah, that one's big. I forgot about that.
That's all right. We've talked about that. We've talked about the Islanders at length, and we've talked about Barzal and speculating the bridge deal. We kind of both predicted that the bridge deal for 2 or 3 years was going to come. Ultimately, it came at 3 years, $7 million. I think we talked about how they were probably going to ask him to take $6 to $7 million.
Yeah.
And we're super smart, obviously.
Yeah, and again with that deal, the last year of it is at $10 million, so the qualifying offer for his next contract is going to be high. And I'm assuming that's probably what the kind of holdout was at the end there.
Right.
But it's a good comparable to what Pettersson and Away is going to make next year, because it's going to be more than that. But I don't know how much more than that, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So But that was a good one, like in terms of, I think every RFA is now re-signed. All the big ones.
Isn't Strome in Chicago still not done?
Strome, he signed right after Taves went out, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, did he? I remember we talked about how he had the leverage and they had to sign him, but I didn't see the deal if they did sign him.
I'm pretty sure it was a couple days after, but let me check Cap Friendly.
Right.
But yeah, the other kind of little signings, Ben Hutton signed today a PTO in Anaheim, which is only interesting because he played for the Canucks, and that's about it. And then Brett Ritchie signed a PTO in Calgary, which is interesting in a way because he's going to be one of those guys that's going to be really annoying to play against. If he I mean, again, all these guys on PTOs, I'm just assuming they're making the team now. Yeah, he signed 3 years, I think, at $3 million. 2 years at $3 million.
Not bad.
Yeah.
Not bad.
So they needed to do something after, obviously, the injuries.
And then I guess the big news from yesterday, the developing news that turned into big news, was Corey Crawford going on to personal leave from camp, leading to a couple days later retirement from hockey, which is shocking and super sad for him. And they haven't said why, as far as I know. I mean, I would just speculate it's got to be his health from concussion history and stuff like that.
What I'm wondering too with the Crawford situation is if Chicago knew in the summer that could be a possibility, and that was part of the reason why they didn't try to resign him.
Right.
Because if it was concussion related, which again I would assume it is, except for him taking that leave, which I don't know, it just seems a bit weird. Like I would assume that Chicago would have known kind of where he was at with his concussion.
Well, I assume the events probably would have went like he had recurring symptoms that were like bad, and then instead of like concluding right then he had to retire, he probably went on that personal leave to take a couple days to really like come to terms with the fact that it was over, you know?
Yeah.
I'm imagining that, like, I feel like that's how I would have to process it, at least myself, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And it's just interesting that both the kind of older goalies that move teams, him and Lundqvist, I mean, I guess there's still Anderson who would fit into that category, but both those guys aren't going to play with their new team unless Lundqvist comes back next year or something. But at this point, I'd say that's unlikely. So just interesting times in the.
Yeah, I wonder what New Jersey's going to do. I read they're scrambling and trying to get Antti Ranta out of Arizona.
Oh yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah, because they have Blackwood, who's a decent goalie, obviously, and then who is their other young goalie in their system?
Well, it's a different prospect that he's older than Blackwood, and Blackwood kind of passed him.
Right.
I can't remember who it is.
I think he played for Team Canada at the World Juniors. I know Blackwood did as well, but I think the other one did too. But anyway, yeah, I assume they're gonna try and get someone because that's pretty big hole.
Do you think A, they could try to steal Craig Anderson from his PTO in Washington? Or B, do you think they go for Jimmy Howard? Or is Jimmy done? We keep bringing up the Jimmy talk.
I mean, again, if a team, I could see New Jersey being a team that would maybe offer Jimmy Howard like a chance. I don't know. I don't know about players moving around from PTOs right now. But I'd say they're more likely to go after Howard.
There you go.
But they might even be regretting letting Corey Schneider go now. That was the other thing I was going to say.
Right.
But my last kind of bit of news, hockey news, is that the WHL announced they're going to play a 24-game season. They don't know when it's going to start. I still think it's going to be really challenging for them to pull this off, but we'll see.
Because they're up and down the coast across the border, right?
Yes, and I mean, there's not that many US teams, so you could move. Like they were talking about having them all play in a bubble in one area, but that's like a lot of teams
And a
for
lot of money. A lot of money for that
and a
league.
lot of money for the WHL. And like, yeah, you could move those American teams to Canada for the year. I just think it's going to be hard for that any junior league really without the money. I don't know what the Q has said they're going to do because I know they stopped playing, and then the OHL is going to do their no hitting league or whatever. But yeah, I think junior hockey is going to have a very hard time, and if they pull it off, good for them. But I don't know. They're not going to make any money. That's the problem.
Yeah, I think they're all just they've accepted that at this point.
Yeah.
But we'll see how it goes, and I'm excited. I'm excited to watch some hockey, and I'm excited that possibly a week from now, next weekend, we can do this again, and we'll be able to talk about what the PTO has turned into, talk about the results of a couple early games. That should be all fun.
Yeah.
I'm
excited.
Alrighty, well, I'm good to sign off. You're ready, good to sign off?
Yeah.
All right, well, thanks for everyone for tuning in, and this has been Hockey Talk on the Rock, episode 14. Lauren Keith, and we will be back.
Peace.